Welcome back to another episode of Authentic with Meg. I am your host, Meg, and this is a safe place where we get to be our most true and honest selves. Ooh, I'm so excited for this episode. I barely got sleep last night because I was just so excited and eager to have one of my most truest, honest, closest friends that we've literally watched each other grow up in the last 10 years. And it's been such a privilege and honor to get to know this beautiful human being. And I'm so thrilled to share her with you all today. We have Miss Bree on the podcast today, who is super powerful, and you're going to learn a lot about that today. She is a master manifester. She is a single mom, and she has done some really amazing things, especially in this last year. She decided to pick up her roots in Minnesota, do her own thing. She flew out into Denver, Colorado, and she's been building a beautiful life for herself and her child. And I'm super excited to hear from her today because she has really taken the time to do a lot of inner healing work. And I know we've talked about that on my podcast before. And she's really devoted to self-care, self-love, but not only that, but sharing her gifts with people through crystal healing and through all the different platforms that she's on. She's on TikTok. She's been growing her YouTube channel to 1.5K followers, which is super exciting, something that I definitely know I can learn from her from. And I'm just so excited to have her on here because, honestly, I think getting more perspectives on how each and every one of us can be our authentic selves is super important. And I want to share with you all, like I said in my first episode, different viewpoints from different people who are in different walks of life. But also, this is a human being who's devoted to this work. And I'm really looking forward to having her share her story with you all today, and for us to get into it. So welcome, Bree, to the Authentic with Meg podcast.
Thank you so much. It's such an honor to be here. It's such an honor. I'm overjoyed to even be on here. Like I told you, I can cross something off of my vision board already early in January. So snaps on that.
Let's get it. I love that. And the fact that you manifested it is a whole nother thing, which hopefully we can get into manifestations and how that really works. Because I think a lot of people are wanting to, create the life that they want, but they don't really know how. And I know that energy type work is so powerful. But before we get into it, one of the questions that I want to ask you before we dive into your story and your background is, what is authentic about you? What makes you your most true and honest self?
Yes. Oh my goodness. I feel like what makes me my truest, honest self is just first off being comfortable with being myself. That's like something that I have battled with for so long, is just being comfortable being my loud, boisterous self. I always felt like I had to be, conservative and quiet, and but really the real me is loud. She's funny, she's wild. Like, why not tap into those sides of me and show other people like this is who I am? And kind of tear down those childhood traumas that I was too loud or that I used to do too much. So really digging deep into my childhood, I think, was how I started to unbury my authentic self. So I'm so excited that I've gotten to get this far. And I know that I still have a lot of unlayering to do because there's a lot of work that I still have to do to become more, authentic and being okay with being myself in all settings. So, yeah.
Wow, that's so powerful to hear, not only that you've realized what your highest evolvement is like, and that you're not just looking at it and saying, okay, one day, but you're actually embodying it, and that you're going through the actual work that it takes to make that come to life. And I think you brought up a really good point that I totally relate with is, just realizing like this doesn't happen overnight. And
Right.
I think a lot of people see, the highlight reels on social media of, oh my gosh, Megan and Bree, they are living their best lives. Nothing is hard for them. But in reality, a lot of times, in most cases, people had to go to hell and back in order to create the life that they're living. And the fact that you actually took time to heal and to ask yourself some of those deeper questions, I think is super important. And so let's get into it. So what brought you here? What's your story?
Yes, my story. I feel like my spiritual journey where I really wanted to dive deep into spirituality happened right after a really bad breakup. Like I guess I kind of lost myself within the relationship, and I I didn't know like myself anymore. Like I felt like I was just so consumed in this relationship. We had been together for 4 years. It ended in heartbreak, and I just felt like, you know, I was pretty much I'm never dating again. Like I'm never dating anyone again. I'm never like losing myself again. Just all these like negative things came up. And the rest of that year was kind of like a darker year. We broke up in like about February of that year. And later within, I kind of was dark. I was kind of dark within the next couple of months. And crazily my life like flashed before my eyes because I did end up getting shot, and that is what really pushed me to spirituality. Like at first I would go into stores and I kind of be, you know, like attracted to crystals and stuff, but I didn't get it. Like I was just like, oh, these are just rocks. Like why am I trying to get this? Why am I trying to buy this? But later with after I got shot, I was like, okay, I need to go into therapy. I went in a really dark place. Um and I felt like I just was on repeat. Like it was a repeat of everything that happened. I thought like, oh my gosh, what about my son? You know, I there was a lot of things that came into my mind just knowing that okay, one more step. Oh, if I would have been one more step to the right, I would have been dead. So,
Yeah.
you know, just knowing that and realizing like, okay, how precious life is, and you know, just really getting into why I'm here and have I done everything that I wanted to do. Like it kind of just all came at once. Like I was just like, oh my gosh, I haven't really tapped into who I am yet, and I could have died. So I think that was like a huge eye opener for me when that happened. And I kind of just went into a dark spiral, and I was like, okay, therapy, got into therapy. And that's when I started to really dive deeper into my childhood stuff, the childhood stuff, and just feelings of like not feeling wanted as a child and by a lot of different people in the family. Um, and you know just feelings of different abuse and things that happened, you know, always getting whoopings and stuff like that, which is big in the black community, you know, unfortunately. But yeah, therapy really helped me dive deeper. But yeah, once I started therapy and I really got into the events of the shooting, she really, you know, tore it apart and made me realize, okay, this is what happened. We went step by step, setting by setting. And once I did that, I kind of started getting into crystals. Now, this is the point where I'm getting into crystals. I went to my first crystal shop, um, and I noticed so many positives that came from having crystals in my space. Like, I started feeling energy from the crystals, and being around them was just a different feeling for me. So then I started getting deeper. Like I wanted to know more. I started doing research. I started getting on YouTube, started hearing other people's stories because, like I said, growing up in a Christian household, I didn't know anything about spirituality. I thought, you know, I really believed in like Jesus Christ. I didn't ever think about like the universe and source. You know, that sort of stuff was never like part of my childhood. So to learn all of that from scratch and to start getting into like something about being still, meditation. Like that was so weird for me and also my family too. They were pretty like they were pretty a little like shocked. Okay, you're using crystals, you're, you know, getting cards. And we always thought growing up that cards and tarot cards and things like that were demonic. Like they thought those types of things were demonic, and so it was a lot. It was a lot coming out to my family about being spiritual, but thankfully they actually embraced it. They actually embraced it. They bought crystals because I told them, okay, my mom was the first one that came with me to a crystal shop, which was crazy. She got crystals for herself. She had never even heard about it. Um, which in her childhood, she was raised the same way, Christian. So, um, dealing with that and also heartbreak and getting shot, it kind of just all led me to my spiritual journey, which I'm in now. I've been in my spiritual journey for about almost 3 years. So now it's like even bigger. And, I was led by my spirit guides to start a crystal business. And it was like the name came to me right away, Breeze Crystals. And, so many things came about. So many things came about that my spirit guides obviously led me to. But just building that relationship with my spiritual team and with my ancestors has been absolutely amazing on how I communicate with them, how they communicate with me. And we communicate a lot. We're like very tight. We're very tight. So that's a little bit of my story of how I got onto the spiritual journey and how I am now.
Mm. Wow, you just shared so many wonderful things, and I appreciate your vulnerability. This is
Yeah.
definitely a safe place to talk about these different things. And I know, the challenges that you went through, especially with being shot, that's not something that I can relate to whatsoever. I can
Right.
relate to getting whoopings, even though I come from a white privileged family.
Yeah.
That's definitely something that I've had to overcome as well. And then also you just mentioned like there were some judgments that were also coming from your family as you started to go on this path and ask some deeper questions, which is absolutely something that I've been overcoming. And I just
Mhm.
did an episode all about judgment and whatnot. And, what were some of the things that really helped you overcome aside from therapy, being scared of what are people going to think if I step into my authentic self?
Yeah, oh, that's a big one because I still have those fears that pop up now. But I feel like the first thing that really drove me to not care as much about what other people thought or said about it was following my intuition, really tapping into my higher self. Whether that's with meditation, yoga, um, just stillness in general, tapping into my higher self and having a strong intuition, working on my intuition. There are plenty of practices you can do to make your intuition stronger. Those types of things really helped me because when that voice creeps in my head that says, "Oh, what are your parents going to think?" or "Oh, what are your friends going to think?" I kind of just at first it did used to, of course, it did used to scare me like, oh, I don't know what my mom would say about this. But I had to realize that, okay, if I'm doing this is my journey, my life. Everybody's going to have to just kind of kind of just fall in line and realize that this is how I'm living now. And anybody that kind of doesn't get it or doesn't understand, I never like shoo them away, but in the same voice, I keep I just I kind of stay in my own lane, stay in my
Mhm.
own lane. And anybody that doesn't understand it, I just kind of let people think what they want to think, you know.
Right.
I kind of let them think what they want to think. And when I put it out there and I put it like I share a lot of stuff on my Snapchat, and I have a kind of big following on Snapchat, and I still I don't really let it bother me. If people are upset that I want to say affirmation, or if people are, like, oh, she's so corny because she wants to do this and that. Like I've had family say like, oh, I've had family say like, you're trying to, I think like high vibe, like they call me like high vibe or always positive, like I'm always positive. And I don't do it on purpose, but in the same sense, that's how I'm programmed now. I'm programmed to kind of see the positives in all things. I don't want to shy people's emotions away, but in the same
Mhm.
voice, I do want to at least give them a positive perspective on things. So, yeah. But yeah, I mostly just stay true to myself. The things that I want to say, I say it. The things I believe in, I say it. And whoever is not agreeing to it, everybody has their own opinion. That's just what
Yeah.
I diet
So,
down to.
yeah, there's going to be people who don't fuck with us,
Right.
bottom line. And if we
Exactly.
never step into who we desire to be, then we're never actually going to find the people who do fuck with us.
Right.
And I think that's just so powerful because I think that's a huge thing that has stopped me in the past. I mean, I went through it even with this podcast of like, do I really want to share all these things? Like, people are going to know more about me. And that's really scary because I know there's a lot of people who don't agree with me or don't agree with the lifestyle that I'm living, or
Hmm.
even just like swearing on my podcast. Like, I'm so scared to do that, but I'm doing it anyways because that's
Yeah.
who I am in my day to day, and it's just so refreshing to meet other people, which I'm sure you can agree on, who are stepping into this mindset of, you know what, I'm going to be myself regardless because I only live one life, you know,
Right.
and yeah, there are going to be people who are not going to support us. But what I find so interesting, and this has happened same in my journey that you just shared with your journey, is that the more that you did decide to show up and say, hey, this is who I am, people
Hmm.
actually started, you know, even if at first they didn't agree with us, or they had these prejudices of like, oh, you're a witch, or what you're doing is
Hmm.
demonic, or when that's not the case whatsoever. I mean, we can go into the whole witch trials and all that history, which is a whole nother topic in itself. Maybe we have to do a episode on that. But what I found, in what it's cool to see within your story as well, is as I've continued to progress on this journey of, you know, stepping into who I believe I am and my highest self,
Hmm.
I've actually found that a lot of those people who didn't initially agree have actually wound up seeing some of the positive changes that have happened in my life by me continuing to show up.
Hmm.
And now they're actually really supportive, and I've been able to, you know, really change their perspective. So I think that's also a really important point, to not be mean or cruel to the people who
Hmm.
don't understand us,
Right.
and just recognizing they're on their own healing journey. They might not be at the same spot as us. They
Hmm.
are just projecting their emotions of their unhealed trauma, or, you know, they see something within us that they haven't faced within themselves. And it's just powerful to see that when we don't shame people and we come from a place of compassion
Right.
and understanding, because that's the way that we're loving ourselves, that it really can create a sense of unity long term, which I think is so, so beyond powerful.
Yes. It's beyond powerful. And another thing I was gonna say is I had to learn early on that I wasn't gonna be able to take everybody with me. And that
Mm.
was hard for me because I'm so family oriented. Um, yeah, I wanted to, when I did my first session of healing, I wanted to tell everyone. I wanted to be like, this is what I did. This is how I did it. I want this for you too. The feeling is so freeing. Like I just wanted everybody to feel that too. And I learned early on, like not everybody is ready. Not everybody is going on the same journey as you are. And that, it kind of hurt. It kind of hurt when I like would tell people like, "Oh, this is what I did. I hope it works for you." And then they don't take it seriously, or so I started to kind of just realize like, okay, Bree, you're on your own journey. You could tell people what you did, how you are going along your healing journey, but it doesn't mean that they are going to do it or that they need to do it. Everybody has their own life and their own path. So that was also a way of me kind of dying down the other voices because, I'm doing what I'm doing and they're doing what they're doing. I kind of had to separate it because I'm so, like I said, I'm so family oriented. So that
Mhm.
was really big with me of stepping back and being like, okay, let me give space. Let me give space. So yeah.
Oh, I'm just giggling over here because I went the through the same thing when I started my personal development journey about 10 years ago. I went to my first leadership seminar type thing where they were, talking about all these great tools and books and podcasts and mindsets on, deconstructing my past and really stepping into my future and manifesting it. And I remember going home and like spilling and basically throwing up all this information onto my siblings and onto my family. And like they weren't in a place, or they weren't even in the interest of field to want to reciprocate that. And it really did open up that rejection wound.
Right.
I think both you and I share this very deeply. We both have, healing that we've had to do specifically with our dads growing up. And, for me, I have a beautiful blossoming relationship with my dads. I've been working through a lot of the challenges that I've had, but the truth is, my dad wasn't really there growing up, and not necessarily his fault. There was a lot of different things that were going on. My parents were divorced. But it led to this wound of just not feeling enough and just feeling like I had to look for love in other places or compete with other women. And so I'd love to hear, how that has corresponded into you, really stepping into your truth, because, with you stepping up and saying, like we've been talking about, I'm going to be this person. These are things that I'm interested in. I'm going to share them with the world. I'm sure that also kind of opens up that wound for you as well of, the fear of rejection, which I think goes a lot into this topic of judgment. What kind of has helped you through that fear, and also with, also learning to forgive? Because I think that's a huge part of this whole journey too, as well, is being able to see these people for who they are and for the traumas that they had on themselves as kids as well, and how that has manifested into maybe the way that they treated our mothers or treated us when we were growing up. I'd be curious to talk through that with you, because I don't think we've really talked a lot about kind of what your past was with your dad. And I know that'll be a really great deepening in our relationship too.
Definitely. The feeling of rejection really does tie into childhood. And when I was a kid, crazily, I used to call myself the fatherless child. I used to write that in my journal, and I was only like 10 years old, but I used to write that. And, I never wanted to be honest with my mom about it. I always thought, oh, it'll hurt her feelings. Like if I say something or if I ask any questions, it will hurt her feelings. But thankfully, I did have a fatherly figure that was there, that's still in my life today, that has always checked in and checked on me and stuff. But it wasn't the same, of having someone there that you could create a bond with. And um I've wrote so many journal entries of, okay, I need to forgive this man. Like he's probably sleeping somewhere and, going on about his life, but I need to forgive him. But um that as a child really does create a sense of you're not good enough. It really does. And then there were times when there were father daughter dances and you don't feel included. Thankfully I did go to one and my uncle took me, but that was nice. But it's still not the same, still not the same. So dealing with that has been a trial of my life. I've literally been trying to heal. I tried to heal that part of me for my entire life, going on 27 years. So the way I really got through it was obviously all my journal entries. I love to go back and read them to see how I was feeling in that moment when I wrote it, even back when I was a teenager and I used to write stuff. Go back and read it, see how I was feeling then and how I'm feeling now. Um, and the crazy part about it is I had so much anger and resentment toward this person that I don't even know, when really I needed to do the forgiveness to my mom. My mom was really the one that I needed to forgive. Which I did just recently actually did that. When I was at my lowest point here in Colorado, I had a conversation with my mom and I was like, Mom, I actually asked the questions that I've been scared to ask her for years. I was like, can you tell me this story about him? Did you lose contact? Like, what happened? Because that was the first time I ever even asked her those questions. So even her, she like really got emotional. She really like broke down and was just like, I'm sorry. I kind of just pushed him away. I didn't even like have I don't even try to contact him. He had a long last name. I don't even remember what it was. Like I kind of just cut him out of my life, which stems back to her childhood. She had a lot of childhood issues with her dad. So to feel like I don't need I don't need you. Like that's pretty much it came from her childhood. So in that moment I couldn't blame her. I didn't judge her. I just said, you know what? I forgive you, mom. Like I forgive you for not keeping contact with him, for not like making sure that he was a part of my life, or kind of just shutting him out, because I've been there before. I've wanted to do that to my son's dad plenty of times, so I kind of had to put myself in her shoes. And um it felt freeing to forgive her. It really felt freeing to finally forgive her, because the whole time I'm holding this anger and resentment toward him, I should have been talking to her. I should have been forgiving her. So that was like huge for me. And I wrote my dad a letter, and I burned it for a sense of forgiveness, like to finally let it go and to let that hole in me be filled, because it had been empty for 28 years. So to to feel that and to know a little bit of my background now, like now I know my dad, he was an African man. He was from Liberia. So now I know I have some Liberian in me. So that was cool to know. But yeah, that was a powerful experience, and to let that go and finally move forward. And it kind of healed my relationship a little bit with my son's dad too. It kind of That's the thing, forgiveness opens doors to like so many different paths. Like you'll be able to forgive more when you have forgiven that one person you needed to forgive your whole life. So um yeah, it even tied into me doing a whole forgiveness ritual for my son's dad too. So the dads, I had a whole circle for the dads, my dad, my son's dad, like just dads in general, and also just black men. Like the feeling that I had towards black men. Of course, like I date black men, I love black men, but I had a little bit of a resentment toward them. Like I had a feeling that like you guys, like, there's different things that I have felt towards them. Like there wasn't all bad stuff, but due to my childhood, I had a little bit of resentment toward black men. So just shifting that, I think, has been huge for me. So instead of thinking of them as like not shit, I I kind of started like sometimes I used to be like, okay, okay, so instead of doing that, I really started shifting my mindset. Like, no, men aren't like this. Men aren't like this. They're actually kind. They're sweet. I started to do that. Because unfortunately, I didn't have many examples of that growing up. So it kind of paints the picture for everybody. Unfortunately, I knew there were good men out there, but I always had the inkling like, no. And that was just in men in general. I'm not just saying black men, but in men in general, I had a little bit of inkling like, are they really good? Because of how I was raised, and that there's no real role models in my family. So, and I think a lot of black women unfortunately can resonate with that. Like sometimes it is hard to have a good example in the household. So, well, in my household, I won't speak for everybody, but in my family, it was hard to see a good man like doing what he needed to do. So that drove me to date not so great men. It really all stems from childhood. So yeah. Yeah.
Well, thank you for your vulnerability and courage to share all of that. definitely isn't an easy topic, but relating it back to the podcast, really, I mean, you see all these beautiful people in the world, but you don't see the pain and sorrow and all of the tears and frustration and rage and anger that they go through to get to these places. And I just really appreciate the level of
Yeah.
openness that you had with sharing that. And it definitely hit me in many different ways because, again, I'm not Black, I'm a white privileged woman, but I definitely felt a lot of those same things with having separated parents growing up and just feeling like, uh, I didn't have the greatest role models of what a man should be. And
Yeah.
thankfully I had my stepdad, my bonus dad, who has been absolutely wonderful, amazing, and he showed up and did those things, but there was still this core wounding of, not having my, biological dad really a part of my life all that often. And also with anyone who has gone through any type of sexual assault with a man as well. Personally, I've gone through,
Mm-hmm.
really being scared of men in general in life, and really just having to
Mm-hmm.
realize not all men are bad, and that, really taking that time to forgive and to let go. And that was something that came up a lot in my therapy, is forgiveness and letting go. And I didn't actually know what that meant for quite some time. I would hear it often, and I'm sure listeners on this podcast are like, okay, but how do I forgive and how do I let go? And I think you just shared a perfect example of it. And it's by facing it. It's by having conversations with these people. And I love that you also utilize love letters, even though maybe they're filled with pain.
Yeah.
There's a great example, and maybe I can link it in the show notes of how to write a love letter. But essentially what you can do is, at least for me, what I've done is there's, 5 different sections. And the first section is, I'm mad because of XYZ. And you just write down all the reasons why you're angry or why you're mad. The next section is, I'm frustrated. And you write all the answers as why you're frustrated with that person. And then the next section is, talking about why, or that you're sorry. I'm sorry for this person for XYZ.
Mm-hmm.
I'm missing a section. But the last one is that you actually forgive them for all of the things XYZ. And then you write at the very end, the last section, which would be, I love you for XYZ. And then you can choose. And
Yeah.
my mom has been preaching this to me for years, to just let it go on paper. You don't ever have to give it to the person. You got to get it out of your system, though. I think so many of us carry around all of these unspoken emotions, and it really does fuck with our nervous system. And it can, long term, if that's not taken care of, can also go into chronic illness, chronic disease. What's actually interesting, I was just reflecting on this the other day, is I used to have the biggest pain in my foot. I had, I couldn't walk on the top of the ball of my foot for multiple years. And that was kind of around the time when I was in my lowest of lows, which I've shared on my story. And it wasn't until I started going to therapy and started getting into my spiritual work that I just realized, I no longer have that pain in my foot, because I've taken so much time to release the energy. And there's lots of studies out there these days too that say that energy really is stored in our bodies. And if we don't take the time to do, stretches, or to talk to someone, or to do any of the rituals that you have mentioned, and to really work through that, it can really affect our day-to-day peace of mind and life. And for me, I didn't go on runs. I didn't do a lot of the active stuff that I used to do because of that pain that I felt in my foot. And now I can do whatever I want because I don't feel that anymore. I'm curious to hear a little bit more about, how this has really corresponded to the relationship now that I know that you've got with your son's dad. Because for anyone who's listening, they aren't really, from what I've heard, you're not living in the same state as them. You decided to pick up your roots and say, you know what, I'm dreaming of living in Colorado. I know you had manifested that for a handful of years, and you made it happen. And you didn't let anyone stop you from doing that. Can you kind of walk us through? So it's kind of like a double whammy question of, one, what helped you get the courage to get up and leave? Because I think there's a lot of people, especially in my community, who see all the things that I'm doing. That I've moved multiple times. I'm moving very frequently right
Mhm.
now. I'm on the road. And there's a lot of people who are like, "Oh, I wish I could do that." And there's a lot of limiting beliefs that I think that
Mhm.
are happening with people specifically in that. So I'd love to hear kind of like, one, how did you, what kind of things did you have to overcome and what was your mindset on moving? But also, how has that correlated into the relationship now that you have with your son's dad who is living in Minnesota?
Definitely. So I decided to move mostly for myself. I knew that if I wanted to get farther on my spiritual journey, that I was going to need some distance. I was going to need some distance from what I was used to. And I was really scared because I've been around my family my entire life, my entire family, like not just my mom. No, like my cousins, my aunts, my uncles. Like we've all lived 10 minutes away from each other. So it was a huge leap. And I feel like, well, my cousin did it first. And when I seen that she could do it, I was just like, okay, okay, it's possible. Sometimes you need to see people do it to know that, okay, it's possible for me to do it too. Um, and when I finally decided to do it, I had butterflies in my stomach when I told my cousin that I was going to even do it. Um, but once I finally like decided, okay, and it was my going away party. I knew it was real. I was like, okay, it's real. I'm on the plane. I'm leaving. And ever since then, I've really developed such a stronger relationship with myself. It's crazy how being around family and being around like the people you know in your norm will gets you more distant from yourself. I feel sometimes, like, I'm not saying you can't be yourself around family, but it's like you're not one with yourself, like, because you're so used to being around everybody. That's who you've been growing up with. Like, you kind of have a mask a little bit. But when you're by yourself, you could freely, just like when you're by yourself, you could freely dance, you could express yourself, you could sing, you could do everything you want to do when you're alone. So I feel like it was scary, but it was so needed. And the relationship now that I have with my higher self, my spirit guides, my ancestors, my intuition, my chakras, everything is aligning. Like, everything is aligning when I'm able to take that moment. I can still be a mom, but I'm able to take that moment to really have that time to myself. I can go do whatever I want. Like, my mom, she was a very in my life mom. She wanted to do something with me every single day. She wanted to, if she could, she would live with me for her entire life. She was just kind of like that mom. And I love her so much. But, eventually that you get less time alone. And I feel like alone time is solitude is needed. Like, I had to go in hermit mode when I came here. I had to kind of not talk to anybody. I didn't really text or call anybody that much when I first moved here because I needed time to like decompress, realize that I had just moved, and spend time with myself and getting to know myself again, that authentic version of myself, that the little Bree that doesn't have to hide anymore because I'm by myself. I don't have to hide anymore. My family's in Minnesota and I love them all dearly, but little Bree can come out to play now. So that was huge. And when it comes to my relationship with my son's dad, honestly, it didn't really change much. Unfortunately, he's not in Amir's life as much as I would want him to be. But then again, that does come from my childhood trauma. I feel like I'm always on him. Like, you need to call him, you need to see him, you need to talk to him because that's what I wanted as a kid. So that comes out of me so much to him. And he he listens here and there, but yeah, I used to feel like I put my son in my shoes. I put my son in the shoes that I feared him to be in. When I was a kid, I didn't want to feel like this, and now I'm making my son feel like this. Like, what have I done? I used to have so much mom guilt around it. Um, but then I realized, okay, maybe instead of thinking that way, I'm blocking my blessing for finding somebody else, or not even finding, but somebody else being attracted to me that's an amazing father figure. Like if I'm putting all this energy into him and what he's doing and what he's not doing, that's kind of blocking the energy from a beautiful relationship to come into my life. So I started to think of it in a different light and realize, okay, let him do what he's going to do. If he calls, he calls. If he doesn't, he doesn't. But just know in my heart that eventually I'm going to end up with somebody that's an amazing father figure. I won't even have to ask, so switching my mindset into that has been a practice. Like, okay, let it go. He didn't call like he said he would. Let it go and focus on myself for right now. And the more that I focus on myself and give myself that love, the universe will draw in that person that is meant to be the amazing father for my son. So
Yes.
that's that's what I'm
Manifesting what you do well.
that's what I'm like, yes. It's on my vision board. So
Oh, thank you for sharing all those nuggets of wisdom. I think, so many people, again, just, want to do these different things, but are so scared of just taking that step. And it's really having the faith in the unseen and just recognizing like no one else is going to live our lives for us. We have to. And if we want to move somewhere, or if we want to quit that job or start our own business, like we have to bet on ourselves. And essentially, I think people think that, I have to do this and I have to go all in and it has to work out. Well, we don't know whether or not something's going to work out, but the only way that we're going to figure that out is if we actually take a step forward and give it a shot. That's one of the biggest things that I had to realize with moving from Minnesota to California, then to Colorado, then now I'm back in California, is that I never know if I'm going to like these places, if I'm going to like those people that are here, or if it feels like a good place for me to, just be. I'm never going to know it if I don't actually do it. And at any point, I can go back to Minnesota.
Right.
I can. That's the reality. At any point, I can get a different job, or any point, you can do those things. So I think there's the more that we really work to have faith in ourselves, really, and that we are our own best cheerleaders, the more that we can actually go and, accomplish those certain things. So I love hearing that story from you. And then I also love just what you shared about the importance of alone time. I think a lot of us, myself included, I've gone through this where, I lost myself in certain relationships. I'm going to have Kyle on the podcast. We're going to talk through how him and I actually became very codependent during the pandemic because we were living with each other, both working from home, and we both kind of felt like we were losing ourselves. And what we found was, instead of spending more time with each other, which naturally people would think is the best way to heal a relationship, whether it's with your family or with a significant other, is to spend more time with that person, when in reality, we need to detract. We need to go spend time with ourselves and build up happiness within ourselves, feel that joy, and then come back to the relationship where we're bringing that positive energy into the relationship and it ultimately flourishes. So I love that you just touched on the importance of alone time. And one thing that I realized with that as well, especially with, maybe not having the father figures in my life that I had hoped for, was also just realizing like I needed to learn how to parent myself. I needed to learn how to, talk to that little girl who was wounded and to validate her emotions, because I can't expect anyone else to do that, And I think that's something that a lot of people struggle with is, they're expecting all these things from other people. And I love that you touched on that with your baby daddy, is that, is that instead of, expecting these things out of him, is just realizing we can't control other people.
Unfortunately.
That's a really hard truth. As much as we want to fix people, or we want to have them do certain things, like we can't control them. The only person that we can control is ourselves. So what are we going to do about this situation? And I love that you just touched on how, instead of focusing on so much of the negative and what you wish were to happen in that relationship is just accepting it for what it is,
Right.
giving him compassion for where he is at in his journey, realizing, he's his own adult.
Right.
It's not your responsibility at all to encourage him to be a part of your child's life, which, and to some extent is super great on your part that, you've given him that open door and opportunity and, you've
Hmm.
let him know, even if it is through your own projections, that this is what is important and that you would like to see in the relationship. But that you just said, you know what, I'm going to go inward. I'm going to take this time to really focus on what I want. And one thing that I actually did with my relationship before Kyle, which it sounds like you're doing very much as well, is, envisioning, imagining, whatever you want to call it, maybe even writing it down, like you said, maybe putting it on your vision board, is actually manifesting the type of partner that you want. And,
Right.
identifying, this is the way I want to feel. This is the way that I want them to show up, and really setting those expectations. Because I think a lot of us get into relationships and maybe there's just like this initial excitement. Maybe you are
Yeah.
attracted to them, but I think what is super mature that you're doing, and that I did as well, is that we're actually, looking for certain qualities within a person, not just looking for that attraction and that quick fix,
Right.
within a person. So it's not an easy thing to do. It definitely takes a lot of intentionality, and it just is really refreshing and a breath of fresh air to hear that I'm not the only one who has gone through it, and just to
Hmm.
hear your perspective. And while our stories are so different because we've had very different upbringings and we've gone through obviously a lot of different things, it's just cool to see someone with a similar mindset and approach to how they are actually choosing to overcome these things. So I actually want to hit on one of the things that you talked about a little ways back, which was having a positive mindset. So I think, there's this talk about toxic positivity, which I could actually disagree. I think positivity isn't actually toxic. I think it's really good to look at the things that are good within a situation. But at the
Hmm.
same time, I do agree that it means to also not invalidate the tough emotions, because ultimately
Right.
the way that we are able to get to those joyful place and transmute pain into happiness is actually by walking through it and not by, brushing the hardships under the rug. So I'd love to hear a little bit more about your mindset on really ultimately what it is having a growth mindset, a willingness to say, okay, here's what it is, but here's what we're going to do about it. And instead of being like, woe's me, which, yes, we can all have some moments like that. And
Hmm.
my therapist calls it being in the pit. But
Hmm.
there's always a hole up at the top of the pit where we can see the light. And I think a
Hmm.
lot of people kind of get stuck at just not looking up to see the light and realize that there's actually a ladder right there that they can climb up to get out of the pit.
Right.
um, and even like near, once you get to the top, there's actually people all around the pit who are going to grab your hand and help pull you out, which I think kind of relates a lot to, having a positive mindset. But I'd love to kind of hear your perspective on, how you've approached having a positive mindset while also validating some of those tough emotions, and what that journey's kind of been like for you.
Yes. So positive mindset started. I feel like I've always been a pretty positive person, always kind of like happy go lucky, funny girl. But deep down, yeah, I had a lot of emotions and things that were buried. Um, and being the positive mindset girl that I, girl, woman that I am now, I used to feel bad for kind of always seeing the positive because I feel like people are like looking at me like a certain way, like if they're venting to me and I'm trying to tell them something positive out of it, I started to feel bad, like, oh, maybe I should, stop trying to be positive about everything and just, validate like the way that they're feeling. But the part of me that wants to be positive won't allow it. Like I have to say something that's positive out of it. Like, oh well, at least you woke up today. You're feeling okay. Like at least start with that. Of course, not seeing how people are feeling. Of course, that's not what I'm doing, but just showing people like it's not as bad as it may seem. Like I had to get out of the mindset of it's happening to
Mm.
me. It's not happening to me. It's happening
Mm.
for me. The universe is not going to steer you in a wrong direction. It's either a lesson or a blessing. Like it's one of the two. And
Mm.
sometimes we need the lesson. And just recently moving to Colorado, so many like things happened where I wanted to be negative Nancy. Like I just wanted to be negative, like my son not being in school, and then there was a flood that happened at my house due to a pipe burst, and we were literally like homeless. We were Airbnb hopping, and the I wanted to be down. I wanted to be sulking. Like I did not see that ladder. I did not see the light. I did not look up. I wanted to look down. Like I just wanted to be negative. Like no. Um but, I started to think like, okay, I might be homeless, but I do have a car. My car has heat. I'm eating. I'm healthy. Okay, there's some good things we have to look forward here. We don't look backwards. Let's look forward. And also just trust in my manifestation abilities. I feel like once I'm negative or in a negative like mindset, um I don't believe in myself. Like I just feel like no, there's no way nothing can come from this. Like I want to feel how I'm feeling, like bad. And I did have to validate those emotions. Like, yeah, Bree, this is happening. But now look, you manifested this place. It's 1 block from where you used to live. Your son is still in the district. Like it really, really gave me a test of trust. Like I had to trust the universe with my entire soul because just moved here, didn't even have a job yet, nothing lined up. You have nothing to do but trust. Like, and I feel like that really kept me in a positive mindset because I knew the universe wouldn't steer me wrong, but in the same sense, that realistic part of me wanted to jump out and be like, but this is wrong and this is wrong, you know, just trying to be realistic. But I've noticed that your inner work you do really is a reflection
Mhm.
of the outer work that is around you, your reality. Like what you think is your reality. So if I would have kept thinking, okay, I'm about to stay homeless and I'm not going to have a place to go, that's exactly what would have happened. I would have manifested
Mhm.
that. But me knowing, okay, my son is going to school soon. I need to be somewhere in the district. Me staying on a positive mindset really helped me manifest this and has helped me manifest everything really that I have. So if I know that that's what happens from being positive, there's no way I'm going back to negative, being negative and staying negative. Like, look what I can manifest if I stay positive. And I feel like the universe has always guided me to be positive. 2 years ago, when I started my YouTube channel, my ending outro was, and like I always say, stay positive. And that has been literally the quote of like my life. Staying positive has guided me to so many beautiful experiences. So I don't think I will ever be stuck. Like, even if I do feel like I was at a low point when all of that happened, like the flood and everything, but I never said the word depressed. I never said I'm depressed, or I used words like, okay, I'm frustrated in this moment because I believe the power of the tongue is so real. Like, if you say you're depressed, or, you say that you're this or that, any negative thing, I feel like you can really manifest those types of things in your life. And that's nothing against people that are actually dealing with depression because it's a real
Mhm.
thing. But I do feel like you said, you can climb that ladder and come out of it. You can look up and you can see the light, and it may take time. There's nothing wrong with taking the time. But at the same time, make sure that you do give it to yourself out of self love to try to look up, to try to find the ladder. So those were like huge things that really keep me like positive, even if I'm not feeling like it. I know I can eventually look up, see the ladder, and climb out. So I like the pit analogy.
Thank you. We can thank my therapist for that. Thank you, Becky. So what you're saying is every challenge is an opportunity to grow and ultimately get better. And what I love so much about what you shared too, and is something that I've also switched within my mindset, is that as tough as this is, when I switch from that this is happening to me, that this is happening for me, and that there
Hmm.
might be something greater that's going to come through this hardship. I mean, ultimately, the trigger is a teacher, and we get to choose to actually learn the lesson. But if we're not looking at it from that perspective, that we're just going to continue to stay in that cycle of being negative and not actually
Right.
being able to move forward. And something that I totally resonate with, which is probably why we are such close friends, is also just the power of our spoken word. That's something that I
Yes.
learned early on in my personal development and spiritual journey as well, is that, it doesn't mean to invalidate, if I am actually in a depressed state, but it's also to, change the way as far as I'm approaching it, that, hey, I might be in a depressed state or I'm feeling a little bit down today, but I know that things are going to get better and that I'm feeling this way because of XYZ. But here are
Right.
some of the things that I'm looking forward to, and
Hmm.
really learning to balance the negative with a positive so that we can ultimately dilute it, because that's what positivity will do. It will actually overtake. There's some really amazing YouTube videos that I've seen of people actually showing this with whether it's with batteries or if it's with even like milk. They have some really great visuals on how you can actually dilute negative and positivity. And one of the books that really helped me through that is Think and Grow Rich. It has been
Mm.
super powerful for me to realize that what I think actually is what gets attracted to me. If I'm thinking about something negative, or if I'm looking in the mirror at a flaw of mine, the universe is going to send messages back, whether it's out in public or whether it's with my partner, or
Hmm.
maybe it's content that I'm seeing online that's going to validate that negative emotion, and then I'm just going to feel worse. So if I
Right.
switch that into something more positive, which you're saying is we're ultimately going to attract that kind of energy back to us, and it's actually going to lift us up more, which is why it's so important to have this, really what I see as a resilient mindset towards life. And I think that
Hmm.
you are huge epitome of that. You yourself are one of the most resilient women that I've ever met. I know from the moment that we met, actually, which I don't think we actually shared the story of how we got together, but Bree and I actually used to work at a camp together at the YMCA day camp, and I immediately knew that Bree was someone who I wanted to be around just through her smile. You can see it here on this podcast. So beautiful and bright, but
Thank
also
you.
she was like super into arts and crafts. She always told it how it was. She used to do the most funny skits that I've ever seen in my life, where she would literally embody these different characters. And she's just an all in type of gal, which I really appreciate about you. And that you're also super open minded, but also that you're incredibly honest, which is something that I think is really refreshing, and is the whole premise of this whole podcast, is to bring honesty together so that we can learn more about people and to see, again, the different things that are within ourselves, but ultimately help us get united by sharing, the different things that we've gone through, and realizing that we're actually a lot more alike than we are different. So
Yeah.
as we close out this episode, I'd love to hear just one piece of advice that you would give anyone who is really starting to step into their authentic self.
Yes. I would say a huge piece of advice is just to start with a schedule. Start with something small, like a schedule. When I first started on finding my authentic self, I would do mirror work. Mirror work is huge. To step in front of the mirror, see yourself, see who you are in the mirror and say affirmations, uplift yourself, say 5 things that you love about yourself every day, wake up, talk to yourself, those things are like really big. It boosts confidence. It boosts just you in general. It just boosts you. So I would say definitely start with the schedule of mirror work, journaling. If you can meditate, yoga, things, solitude really is the key to finding your authentic self because when we get around certain people, we sometimes the mask does come on. So I think solitude is like the biggest thing to relearning yourself, learning how to love yourself again, and just being okay that, you're here. This is who you are. Accept it. Everybody's got to accept it. So,
Take it or leave it.
yes, indeed.
Thank you so much for taking the time to be my first host on my podcast. I'm so beyond grateful that you accepted my offer and that we took the time to do this. And I'm really excited to hear what people had to say, what resonated with folks. And if you are someone who is listening to this and you want to stay in touch with Bree, you want to consume some more of her content, Bree, how do people get in touch with you?
Yes, you can get in touch with me on TikTok and YouTube. TikTok and YouTube, my name is BreezyBriTv. Literally BreezyBriTv, spelled just like that all together. And then on Instagram, my name is BreezyBri416. So pretty much all Breezy Bree. And then if you want to support my crystal business, my name is BreezeKissCo on there. So those are like the main ways to get a hold of me.
And I'll link those in the show notes. If you're on YouTube, take a look at the description. You can also find this podcast on Spotify. We're still working on Apple, but we will get there. Well, the goal is to be on all streaming platforms in the very near future. That is what I am manifesting. And again, just want to say thank you, Bree, for taking the time to join us today. I know that you squeezed this in while your son is at daycare. He'll be home.
Yeah.
Here. Hopefully you can get a little time to yourself before he gets back. And just want to say, if this podcast episode resonated with you, feel free to share it on social media. You feel free to reshare it within your Instagram stories. The more we can get the word out, the more that we can impact people's lives in different ways, shapes, and forms. And we are better together than we are alone. So let's unite. Let's share this bad boy out, because this was a super powerful podcast episode. And I'm already super excited for the next one that her and I are going to do together, because there was just so many great
Hopefully in person.
Yeah, hopefully in person. I'll see you. Yeah, we'll talk about that later. Anyways.
Right.
But feel free to do that. Again, thanks so much for joining in. We'd love to hear what stood out to you in this episode, so that as we do plan for an in-person episode, that we can dive deeper into those different topics. Thanks again for joining us.
Thank you.
And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.